intimidated or coerced so that they can vote their conscience.
And isn't there more than one facet to this, though? Like, you've got a bunch of facets to this whole Lawyers for Ron Paul group. There's, there's the diable voting machine section, and then there's this section you're speaking about, and then isn't there a section also separate, maybe, that deals with bound and unbound delegates?
In way we want to unbind delegates. This is a figure of speech that we are using in this lawsuit. We are using a figure of speech that is at a layman's level so that people can understand that when your conscience is protected through an injunctive order by a judge with federal marshals, you no longer feel threatened, intimidated, or coerced so that you can vote your conscience. And if this injunctive order is applied, then the delegates and alternates who go to the Republican National Convention in Tampa, Florida, will then be able to vote their conscience without fear of reprisal, intimidation, coercion, or threat. So this effectively unbinds them.
So there's nothing stopping, nothing in this lawsuit could unseat or stop the delegates that have been elected in under whatever candidate from going down to Tampa and voting. There is not one possibility of all of the work that they've been doing being undermined by them signing on to this lawsuit.
I believe that when people sign on to this lawsuit, they are immediately protected from any coercion, intimidation, or threat because they are a plaintiff in a lawsuit, and that means that they have the protection of the court. Just like in the 1930s when you had prohibition and bootleggers and mafiosos and they would bring them to trial, you'd have people who were witnesses and they would go into protective custody sometimes.
That's criminal.
Yes, that's criminal, but this is a civil rights injunctive order, and there are criminal penalties for breaking these civil rights laws. So okay. This isn't necessarily, I'm just trying to draw a loose analogy to how the court protects potential resources that it's going to use. You are a witness in a civil trial or a criminal trial, and anybody threatens, coerces, or threatens, coerces, or intimidates you in a civil trial or a criminal trial. The judge who is presiding over that trial then looks out over the bench and he points at you and he goes, you threatened, coerced, or intimidated somebody who is just a potential witness or a witness, and you are going to jail because it's contemptible of the court to threaten, harass, or threaten, intimidate, or coerce a potential witness, a potential plaintiff. So any person who is an alternate or delegate who is only considering joining the suit is protected by the court in that they are a potential resource for the court. Any person who has...
Why does it... Okay, so why do you need delegates that have been elected? Why do you need so many of them? And why do you not need the ones that were actually harmed by this process, that didn't get elected, that went through the fraud? Why do you only seek the ones that are bound to the convention?
Okay, right now, our lawsuit will be most effective before the judge as he sits and looks at the filing and sees all of the plaintiffs on the lawsuit. And if his clerks are instructed by the judge, I want to know which of these delegates are actually recognized by the GOP as being authentic, and I want to know which ones were actually elected at district levels. I don't think he's going to make that consideration. And the reason we are reaching out mostly to delegates and alternates, and we're reaching out to state-level delegates and alternates, and we're reaching out to national delegates. We're not only focusing on delegates going to Tampa. We have plaintiffs who have already entered into the lawsuit who were only elected as state-level delegates who then went to their state conventions or caucuses and then voted for Tampa delegates, because some of those people were disenfranchised.
Yeah, you guys talked about that last night in the conference call.
I was not in that conference call. I was busy doing other things for executive committee. And so
I really want to go back to, I want to make sure that I have a clarification here. The lawsuit that's being filed by, what's his name again? The attorney, I don't know, I have it written down.
His name is Richard Gilbert.
Right, Richard Gilbert. So the lawsuit being filed by attorney Richard Gilbert, you keep saying we. All right, and that's fine because you are a partner to this now, and you're really pushing this and everything. But isn't it really him, and hasn't it always been him? And you guys are more a independent support group, essentially.
Usually,
Pat, you're cutting out.
you still getting me?
Now I got you.
Okay, usually in a lawsuit, you have a lead attorney who the court looks to for direction on the lawsuit at all times and expects that lead attorney to then delegate duties among other attorneys.
Yeah. I know all about legal procedure and how that works. What I'm saying is this is his lawsuit. This is not your guys' lawsuit. You guys came in after the fact. He filed this lawsuit and started looking for delegates, and you guys came in once you saw that he was looking for delegates and said that you were there to assist him, right?
I can tell you that I was brought into the Executive Council Lawyers for Ron Paul as I was brought in. I was asked to come and assist them, and part of what I do is I seek plaintiffs for the case, right, and I promote two people to get plaintiffs.
Are you a member of the We the People Network as well, like Bonnie Davis Ross and Lynn Nichols and who else? Jerry Davis, Nikki Nelson. I'm blanking on a couple other names, but are you a member of that We the People Network group?
I am not a member of any networks or groups. I'm a network engineer, a Microsoft certified systems engineer. So if you want to say I belong to a network, I belong to the computer network. I belong to Facebook. I belong to Twitter. And I've signed contracts with Twitter and Facebook. I am not a We the People Network operative. If that's what you're asking,
no,
I'm not a We the People Network operative.
What I'm asking is, I know what We the People Network is, and if you're on Facebook and you're in their groups, they invite you, and you're an admin in groups, and you're a partner of theirs, they invite you to special groups that you have access to, like the admin groups. I mean, I don't really expect you to talk about all. I'm just letting you know I know how We the People Network work, and all I'm asking is, on Facebook, are you a member of the We the People Network page, the one that's facebook.com/We the American People?
I am a member of a group that calls itself We the People Network. I don't make any assumptions about groups or community pages that I belong to.
Are you part of their executive board, like the governing board of We the People Network at all?
No, I have none of these kinds of associations or contacts with We the People Network. And I suggest that instead of asking me what I might be, what I might be in the future, I suggest you get on Google and type in Patjack. I am a very public person. My persona on the internet, I don't hide from the FBI, don't hide from the NSA. I don't believe in any of that garbage. I'm a free man with liberty, and I exercise it. And if you type in Patjack on the internet, I have spent my professional ability to do search engine optimization, which I'm paid for sometimes, to search engine optimize my name and my persona on the internet. I am a wide open book. My entire Facebook profile is as public as I can make it.
That's great. I was just asking. So you're a member of We the People Network. We the People Network is
No, I am not a member of We the People Network. I am a member of their group, and I'm a member of about 6,000 other groups on Facebook. I'm a social network engineer and a social network programmer. I belong to as many groups and as many community pages as I can stuff into my social networks.
Okay, I get that, but I was just talking about the group, the Facebook group called We the People. You said yes.
Carlos,
I was part of
Carlos, let me tell you something straight up. You are obsessed with We the People Network, and I am not. I am not obsessed with We the People Network. I don't carry on a conversation about We the People Network.
Okay,
it's you that are obsessed with We the People Network. It's obvious to everybody in the room. You have an obsession with WTPN, and you want to draw me into your obsession. Do I have to sing the song Obsession to you? Because I'm a hell of a singer, and I can sing it to you, baby. You want me to do that?
Are you going to be in Tampa? Because we could sing in Tampa. But what I'm saying is the group Lawyers for Ron Paul, the executive committee of Lawyers for Ron Paul is made up of the executive committee of We the People Network. I know this, and I assume you know this, right?
I know that there are people all over the internet who do all sorts of things, and I'm not in the business of judging somebody's fruits based upon what group they belong to or say they belong to.
Sir, I don't mean to be rude, but that's a total sidestep of my question.
I'm not here to implicate We the People Network in anything or to.
What I'm here to do is get transparency about this issue and about the group Lawyers for Ron Paul. Lawyers for Ron Paul, just so everybody that's in the room now, there's 25 people know, is made up of, the executive board is made up of Jerry Davis, Lynn Nichols, Bonnie Davis Ross, and a few others. That is the same people that run We the People Network. So what I'm saying is there's a connection there. That's my personal connection. I'm not worried about that. I just wanted to make sure you understood and that everybody understood who that was. You know what I mean? So all I'm asking at this point is what makes Lawyers for Ron Paul somebody that should be listened to, as opposed to Ron Paul's own attorneys who have decided not to file at this point for their own reasons.
I'm not aware of any decision by any group of attorneys for Ron Paul to file or not file. So that may be information you have. I don't have any information that any other attorneys have made a decision to file or not file. But I will say that at this point, you need to go to We the People Network and ask them, because my resources are not about examining We the People Network as an investigation.
I have, Pat. I'm an investigative journalist, and I have. So I've garnered quite a bit of information, but what they do is irrelevant to what's going on right now, because this is really about the delegates. My concern with your organization, Lawyers for Ron Paul, is you're bringing a lot of stealth delegates out into the open that normally wouldn't be out in the open, that are now exposed themselves prior to the actual convention. And I think that that's dangerous, and I think that a negative outcome in your lawsuit will ultimately affect us in a very, very detrimental way, meaning that the RNC can then at that point actually get, if they find in your favor, then the RNC can get an injunction at that point against the delegates, forcing them to vote for Romney, as opposed to being able to just abstain, which is in most states by their bylaws legally allowed.
Carlos? That's not the way to have to address that. The RNC is claiming that they do not have, that there's no jurisdiction of court over them because they're a private organization. So to say that they could use some typo on us and take our energy as for an injunction and flip it on us and file a counter injunction, these things don't happen in court. You don't file a counter, and you may sue for damages after that, and that's a possibility. But to say that the GOP could get a court injunction to force anybody to vote anyway that's contrary to the law. The civil rights law says that it's a crime to coerce, threaten, or intimidate anybody into voting to a certain way. So to think that the courts would allow themselves to be used to force somebody a certain way, I think it's a little far out.
Carlos, let other people on the mic, please.
I just wanted to say thank you for at least giving me the time to answer my questions, and I appreciate the opportunity to get some more information here.
You're welcome, Carlos, and I think you had some good questions. Thank you for asking them.
Pat, I appreciate your time as well. I can't wait to interview Porter on Thursday. I think it'll be great because there's a lot of division about this going on, and I feel like it'll be beneficial for everyone to be able to hear, just like you just did, him answer some questions that all of us want answered. And now we have John in the chat calling me a moron, so I appreciate that, John. Thank you.
Also, everybody else that is a part of Ron Paul Tribune or listens. Oh, Matt Larson's here. Matt Larson is also a moron. Just to clarify everything. Come on, Slevin, go ahead and come up to Mike and let everybody hear what you got to say.
He said he doesn't want to talk on mic.
What's he afraid of?
But Pat, like I was saying before that happened down there, I really do appreciate you taking the time to answer some hard questions. And, we're going to press you a little bit because people in this movement, we care and we're smart and we want to know what's going on. So thanks for the time you took with us tonight.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking me to come in. And it's good for me to have these kind of questions because I begin to understand, and I'll go do some legal research tonight, believe me, because some of your questions have opened up some things that I need to know about. And
I'm just worried. The only thing I'm worried about, quite honestly, is the chance that the delegates won't be allowed or will be stifled in some way down at the convention from doing what we're all here to do. And that's my only concern. So I just want to make sure that everybody involved understands all the facets of that and that they're positive, because I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a moron. So like, I don't really have any technical knowledge about this other than my research I've done. So I would defer to you guys, the ones who are actually going out there with this campaign, to have these answers and to be able to answer these questions truthfully for everyone.
Well, here's one of my observations at this point in what I'm doing with this executive committee for Lawyers for Ron Paul. If we don't do anything, they will continue to take our delegates and alternates away from them. They will continue to punch us and break our fingers and throw us down on the floor and hurt our hips. They will continue with all these truly criminal assaultive techniques, intimidation, threats. I mean, the Liberty Lives team, some beautiful young ladies and their brother went to Arkansas to the summer committee session, and they had two big goons, two big thugs in suits sitting next to this little Ezria Fish. I mean, she's about 5 feet tall, and they were sitting on either side of her, glaring at her. If we don't do this lawsuit, they will continue this, and they will get worse because they'll say to themselves, hey, they filed the lawsuit and they backed down. Send Guido and the boys in. And that's how they operate.
You know what? I agree with you 100%. I'm totally with you. And I don't think anybody that's opposed to what you guys are doing doesn't agree with that sentiment at all. What I think is we're worried about the consequences it has for the work that we've done positively in this election cycle to get where we're at. And I think that's the only thing that we're concerned about.
Well, where we are right now is we are on a battlefield, and the GOP is dropping bombs on us right now. They're getting nastier and nastier and nastier all the time. And the only time that the GOP gets up to do this is when they feel really threatened. Usually the Republican National Convention, it's a big party to celebrate who the rich folks, and anybody that's wealthy in here, I don't mean to be offensive, but the wealthy and the powerful throw this big party, and they get a big chunk of cash from the government to throw their party in their private country club. Basically, it's what's going on. So these people, when they turn nasty, they turn nasty for a reason. It's because they feel threatened. So where we are right now is we're threatening to them. So to get plaintiffs into this lawsuit who feel coerced, threatened, or intimidated is vital to protect them from the cops with billy clubs that will be hired as private security by the GOP so they don't get hauled out and whacked in the head in the parking lot.
All right, well, you're right. And Steve is in here, and he has a couple questions, if you don't mind hanging out for a few minutes.
Not at all, Steve. It's good to see you. I've worked with you in those convention live streams as Ron Paul Banners doing that commentary. That's a lot of fun. I enjoyed that, and I enjoyed that you're being there, and I appreciate your work towards educating all of us on the process and Robert's Rules of Orders, and I think your work attempting to have classes for people so that when they get to the Republican National Convention, they're going to know how the playbook is supposed to be played and can be more effective. And I think you're doing a good job there, Steve.
I thank you, Pat. I have a couple questions. And I think these are some of the concerns that have sparked maybe the slight animosity that's actually kind of gone on. And I'm going to ask you some simple questions in a calm manner because I tend to sift through that kind of stuff. But the one big concern that I potentially have is there's been a push from the Lawyers for Ron Paul group specifically about the lawsuit to get precedents and an injunction on the books to unbind the delegates. And there's been a constant push of we need a lot more delegates to get on that particular case. Now, I'm not an attorney. I'm a simple parliamentarian. But as far as I understand the law, you don't need 600 delegates to be part of a case to set precedents that's already based on a presumed law that's on the books from the Supreme Court that delegates are unbound. So why this push to make more delegates for that specific issue? Because I can understand the things that you're talking about, people getting fingers broke and voting fraud and stuffing ballots. Obviously, you want as many plaintiffs in that case as you can possibly have. But my argument in that group was the specifics of the unbinding of delegates. Why do we need more than one delegate to sign on to that case to get precedence on the books and get an injunction? If the court ruling is, and again, this is just my opinion, so I'm hoping you can answer it for me. If the court ruling is that, yes, based on Supreme Court rulings, delegates are unbound at the RNC convention because it falls under federal election laws, why a push to make more delegates be involved in that specific part of the lawsuit?
Okay, I understand your question. Basically, it's why do we need so many plaintiffs? If you take all the delegates and alternates that are going to be available at the national level to go to the convention, that's approximately 2,650, something around that number. If you take all the delegates and alternates from all the state conventions, you end up with a number of approaching 50,000 people. So let's pretend I'm the judge and I'm sitting and I'm presiding over this lawsuit and I'm presented the lawsuit and I see the list of plaintiffs. And I see that there are 230 plaintiffs, and that's 10% of the national delegates. And even if I don't get my legal staff to research the issue and as the judge say, who are these? Are these Ron Paul supporters? Are these national delegates? There's no criteria that the judge applies in a civil rights suit as to who you are making. He just says, are you feeling threatened, intimidated, or coerced? And is that affecting your right to vote your conscience? Because that's the substance of the case. So he doesn't look at each individual and weight them as, oh, this is a national delegate. We have to protect their right to vote their conscience more than Joe Blow from grungy Texas, with jeans on, who was only a national delegate from a little county that only had a state delegate, that only had 2 state delegates going. What he does is he looks at the entire big picture and he says, now there's 2,400 delegates going to national, and he tells his law clerks, I want you to do me a rough count of all the state delegates that were elected in the caucus and convention process in all the states. And he arrives at a figure. And then he says, how many plaintiffs do I have in this lawsuit? And his law clerk goes, well, currently there are 900 plaintiffs. And he thinks about that, and he says, okay, well, let's do a rough calculation. I'll be conservative. Let's say there are 10,000 people out of all these people that could potentially be plaintiffs in the lawsuit and who could potentially damage. And he takes that set of people and he says, this is enough people where I'm really concerned that there is grievous harm being done and that I need to issue an injunction to protect these people. Then, at that point, he then begins to review the amount and type of harm. And he finally looks at the video of Hereford getting thrown to the floor and the other fellow getting his fingers broken, and he goes, my God, these people are right. But he's so busy with all these lawsuits, there's a process that you have to follow, and the more plaintiffs you have, the more weight the lawsuit carries. And that's a trite way of saying it, the more weight it carries. But it really does depend to the judge greatly on what percentage, what statistical percentage of these people are being harmed. So then he can look at the entire American electorate and he can say, if statistically this number of people are going to be harmed if I don't injunct, then the law is really not being enforced effectively. And then hundreds of thousands or millions of people will be harmed in this manner, so I must issue the injunction.
Okay, well, I mean, is there a magic number? I mean, is there any type of estimated number rather than the 200 delegates that are apparently already signed up?
There is no estimated magic number. It's really all up to the judge. So the more you get, the better. And if he does not issue the injunction, if he says, no, I'm not going to issue an injunction because this law is already effective enough, your next step after that could be to ask to have a grand jury convened to press charges against somebody for this law. But you could actually you might use the precedent that the judge refused to injunct because he thought the law was being enforced effectively. And a refusal to injunct is actually the judge saying, I believe this law is effective and I don't need to injunct. So you could then convene a grand jury and say, hey, this judge in California, he thinks the law is strong enough that it stands by itself where it doesn't injunct. And then you'd have a grand jury make a decision on a criminal indictment based upon the existing law that we're trying to get an injunction to enforce.
Okay, that's what I was concerned about. You just answered my question, because my argument has always been that if an injunction is not done prior to the convention, it kind of becomes a moot point. And what I've been trying to do that seems to be, which by the way, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but 2 days ago, I was removed from the Lawyers for Ron Paul room. I'm blocked from it. But my argument has always been that if we don't have an injunction on the books to state as you claim, that the delegates have to be prepared and educated on the process to protect them. And it seemed like every time I tried to guide them in that direction, and this is where some of this hostility in here comes from, because people have seen this, is it's been combative in there by a small group of people saying, well, stick to the lawsuit. Delegates are going to be unbound. They're unbound by Rule 38 based on the RNC legal counsel. And these are all misconceptions, even though there's some truth to it. It's not the whole story. And if the delegates are not prepared, when they get to this convention, they're going to get outmaneuvered exactly how they were being outmaneuvered in some of the smaller conventions. Because in some cases we were cheated, but I've watched a lot of these streams. In some cases we weren't cheated. We were just outmaneuvered because we did not understand what we could or couldn't do. And that's my biggest concern of this whole thing.
Okay, Steve, I can respond to this. There is a of emotion attached to the Ron Paul campaign that is not evident in the Romney campaign or the other campaigns, because we, as a group of Ron Paul people, we are very hardy, very individual people. And some of us who read about the lawsuit, they think it's a nirvana solution. And many of us in the Ron Paul campaign are likely, and I've done this myself before, we find a great idea and we think it's a really good idea as it is, and we'll pursue it wholeheartedly with a great deal of focus, and we get blinders on. And we begin to think that there's going to be one big solution, and we all know that what the one big solution really is, it's a revolution, a real one, which is what we want to avoid. We don't want that one big solution that's really always in the back of our minds. So what we do is we tend to project our desire to have one solution that's the be-all, end-all. It's the nirvana solution, and we want everybody else to see that with us so passionately that we're willing to strike down any other solution or perspective. And some people think that all of the energies of an individual should be devoted to one solution that they think is the best idea, and they want everybody to be in their tribe, and they want everybody to see that their spear is the best. The only way you're going to get that deer at the edge of the forest is if you use my spear and throw it just the way that I say, all the while not realizing that they could just give that to the tribal member and let them go hunt and learn to hunt themselves, and maybe that tribal member would come back with the deer too, and then you'd have two deer, one that you got and one that somebody else got.
So, Pat, a couple things based on that answer that you just gave. One of the things is that a lot of people that I know are very passionate, liberty-minded people who have been working in this movement for a really long time and doing everything they could, have been chastised, called a troll, been made to feel inferior, been called out for questioning things, and that's not right, and that should stop. Questions are never a bad thing. If anything, the liberty movement should be the movement to realize that. Secondly, you had said that you wanted to go back and research some things yourself based off of our conversation. What are those things?
The things that bother me the most and that I would like to research at this time, simply because I'm not clear on them, are number one, potential harm that individual plaintiffs could face because of a failure of the lawsuit. And right now, I think that the only potential harm that any plaintiff could face right now as an individual from the court that is deciding on this matter, is if the judge thought that the entire lawsuit was so frivolous and so out of order that it was contemptuous of the court. So I think that's a long way away from our thinking. I don't think this judge is going to pick any individual plaintiff and go, hey, you come here. This whole lawsuit is just bogus, and I think you were, this was a really spoiled cause of action. And so in a desire to protect the plaintiffs and to protect the delegates from anything, the lawsuit, the GOP, all these forces arrayed against them, I'm always willing to research anything that might be damaging to the plaintiffs and the delegates in the short term or the long term. So that's one of the things I want to research. And there's some other issues that I would like to research as well. And I guess really the only thing that I really want to research at this point is any harm that may come to the delegates. But I don't at this point want to research how the delegates and alternates and anybody who's a plaintiff in this lawsuit could be protected by the lawsuit, because I am so confident that any movement with a lawsuit at all, whether there's an injunction or not, is going to protect them. Right now, we have the GOP chairmen and the GOP offices trying to avoid service of the suit. And that's a crime. When you intentionally avoid service of the lawsuit, that's criminal. So okay. they're willing to break the law right now to avoid service of this suit. So what I see it as is a big artillery shell that's been launched at the GOP, and it's just hanging in the air over them.
That's really what I wanted to hear also. So I want to put out an invitation to you to join Porter on my show on Thursday. Are you available?
I am available. And what time in Central Standard Time will you be having that show?
I believe it's 8 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Well, I would love to join Porter, because I tell you, Porter is a joy to have on the radio.
I know Porter for a very long time before this, so I'm really looking forward to speaking with him, and also as well.
Okay, what day is that again? That's 8 p.m. when?
Thursday.
I'm going to put that in my scheduler.
Can you, I don't know if I'm friends with you on Facebook. I'm not sure. How would I get in touch with you? I'll give you my email down here in the chat. Can you see the chat? Pat, can you see the chat down here? Oh, there we go. Okay, great.
That's me on Facebook. Send me a message, and we can all be friends. I mean, really.
I really appreciate the way you answered these questions. I have to be honest. This is all I've been waiting for, the answers to these questions. So
we have a conference call that's going to be launched on Wednesday night, and we're doing promotions for it. You've probably seen it. But Richard Gilbert and David Callahan are going to hold a conference call on Wednesday night that will host up to 1,000 people. And they're going to do very much the same what I have done tonight, because I've been in training with them in a way, and they've been in training with me, learning what Ron Paul grassroots really want to hear.
There's a lot of things that need to be cleared up if you want support on this. A lot. So, I mean, there's like a big portion of the movement that's skeptical, and, every time I've asked these questions before, I've been given a link to a conference call, and, nobody can answer them. Nobody will answer them, because I don't know that anyone really knows the answers.
I have a question. Every time I listen to the conference calls and stuff, I get stuff pertaining to We the People Network all the time. Is there a way that you guys can just separate from the WTPN?
Steve, was that Steve?
No, this is Jesse.
Jesse, I think
I've been listening to most of your conference calls, and every time I listen to a conference call, I hear WTPN. This is brought to you by WTPN. Is there a way that we can get you to kind of like separate?
Well, let's look at this. I love to have analogies, and the analogy here that we should study is branding. When you have a billboard and your Coca-Cola company, and the person who provides you with sugar to make your Coca-Cola in that area is always going to come to you, and they're going to say, hey, can we put a little tiny icon on your, just in the corner where you can barely see it, where that's our sugar company icon, and we'll do some work for you, you can do some work for us. And this whole idea of sharing branding, sharing members in social networks, this is a dynamic that we have to deal with. And to sever these kinds of ties abruptly can actually damage, not only, it can damage both products. So this has to be done very carefully, and to consider doing this is imperative at this time. And Lawyers for Ron Paul Executive Committee has always been of the notion that we should be insulated and isolated from all these other groups and all these other influences, so that people will not say, you're just this, or you're just that, or you just want to sell a book. Because we have authors and We have people who sell products and entrepreneurs in our group, so it's easy to look at our group and say, well, he's only doing that because he wants to promote his book, or he wants to sell some spoons or some T-shirts or whatever. So we're always cognizant of, and we're very aware that our reputation and our brand can be affected by others. We're working to solutions to make that work.
All right, Patjack, I have another solution for you. That link on there, that can host 1,000 callers, free high-definition voice calling, and you wouldn't have to include WTPN in it. Just giving you a solution if you wanted to. Absolutely completely free. 1,000 people could be in the call. There you go. I used to use it too.
I will put this in. I have a series of links that I have in a folder, in a bookmark folder, specifically for gear and software and IT resources to study for executive committee. And I'll put this in the bag of tricks, and I will certainly look at this. And I hope you all understand that our day-to-day operations at Lawyers for Ron Paul are pretty intense as we try to serve 50 different states, U.S. territories, get process servers together, find volunteers, get the funds for them, or if we can't get the funds for the volunteers, we then go to a professional process server, and that's dealing with a professional process server is just like getting a paint job for your car. You got to go make a deal with them and a contract and get them the funds and get them the information and what color you want the car to be, not to get paint on your wheels, and the process we're going through to all these defendants and to join these plaintiffs, it's massive. It's a massive data undertaking, and it's not just a data undertaking, it's a real people thing. So it takes phone calls and it takes time, and we are incredibly busy. So the resources we have that work now, we're dependent upon to a great deal because we don't have so much time to train our membership on using the new resources. And when you have 12 people and you need to train them quickly to use a new application, it can be major.
You need to figure out a way to sever that WTPN tie if at all possible. It has way too many negatives, and I think the Lawyers for Ron Paul, if they got rid of that, could do a lot of good.
I agree.
Well, I think that I can show you something that we have taken a step, not necessarily to sever any associations, but to make our own branding stronger. And if you'll see this link that I'm about to put in.
But if you're going to say branding, why do you need a brand?
A brand indicates you are an entity, and you're like any of these applications we use, like Facebook has a brand, it has a little blue bar with an F on it. Twitter has a brand, it has a little bird, and it's a little lighter blue, has a different font. So what I want to demonstrate with that link right there is that Lawyers for Ron Paul yesterday took the logo that I created for Lawyers for Ron Paul, and I downloaded the group banner, and I put the logo on there. And I do realize there was a WTPN, a little blue WTPN bow tie logo on the Lawyers for Ron Paul group for a while. So I took the opportunity yesterday, as some dynamics did change in Lawyers for Ron Paul, and I took the opportunity to not only brand Lawyers for Ron Paul with their own icon that can be used as a little teeny tiny icon on something, it can be used as an avatar, can be used on a timeline cover, can be used on a handbill, it can be used on a brochure that we hand out at the Paul Fest maybe, or something like that. So that's why we need a brand, so we can be easily recognized, and when people see that brand, they say, oh, that's Lawyers for Ron Paul literature, that's about the lawsuit.
Okay, I also want to make a comment about Lynn Nichols. She keeps posting on Lawyers for Ron Paul that all your discussions are being tracked and traced. Obama wants to know all about you and your parents. Also, the Obama campaign aims to harvest an enormous amount of personal data on social media sites like Facebook and others in the bid to build detailed profiles of potential voters. Please move your strategic discussions to the site that is free from tracking algorithms, wethepeoplenetwork.com. What are your thoughts on that? You have Lynn Nichols pushing everybody over to WTPN.
Here are my thoughts on that. I'm a sheep herder, and I have a staff that has a sharp point on it. And I poke one of the sheep in the butt, and the sheep runs, and the other sheep turn around and look at me, and they look at the staff, and they remember that I poked them in the butt too, and they all run too, and they run where I want them to go. And let me give you another analogy. on what on this dynamic. When I was at I was an internet coordinator and a chief technical consultant or director of e-commerce at a wireless communications company in 1997, 96 through 2000, and we were a fast-moving company. And one of the running jokes among the IT group there, and I was the liaison to all the departments for IT, was, is Carnivore finished? Is Echelon finished? And it was a joke over lunch because we all knew it had been written 20 years before. And we had systems in place at the phone company that the government had there because it's law. We had to let them have these systems in place. So it was a joke. We knew then that it's not that the government is listening to everything you do, but every bit of data that goes over a fiber optic line, a T1, telephone line, a modem line, a DSL line, all of it goes through the Seven Sisters, the big DNS servers. All of that information goes through a system of military and government hardware that's closely connected and embedded with the industry. Therefore, all of the data that you send, with voice data, video data, numeric data, whatever kind of data you're sending or receiving, is eventually goes through a government system. So potentially you could be listened to by computers that have special programs that read what you say, that listen to your voice, that look at your face, and they connect all these things and send a letter to some FBI agent somewhere that says, you're the serial killer, go get that guy, okay? And yeah, law enforcement does some of that. But the brutal fact of the matter is the amount of data storage space you need and the amount of processing power you need is as large as all of the area of New York City. Okay, so that technology exists in concept and in practice, but some people overreact to this because they don't understand the code behind the technology and they don't understand the hardware requirements needed. They just hear that this can be done, and immediately they distrust the government so much, and they have such a hatred of the government, which they should, which our founding fathers taught us to, that they immediately assume the worst, that we're being tracked and listened to. Well, let me tell you.
I also would like to throw another comment onto that, too. You do understand that anything you do on the internet is public because you got hackers out there, plus the government can already pick up everything that's going on online without, it doesn't matter if you have a server in your bay like WTPN, it doesn't matter. I mean, there's also people that work at that hosting company that could easily sell information directly right back to the United States federal government. I mean, and ask Mind a Reason. Mind a Reason will tell you all about that good stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are people that not only work at telecommunications company who sell data, but those people are the CEOs of the companies. They sell data to the U.S. government to make money, and that's how it's always been and how it always will be. And my whole philosophy of being wide open is a lot like somebody named Alex Jones. Alex Jones doesn't hide who he is or what he says because he knows the more public that he is, the more that people, just like in this conversation right now, some people in here might be going and checking out my Facebook page, and they'll look at my pictures of the forest and my pictures of lizards and birds, and they'll say, this guy appears to be normal, and then they'll go listen to my music when they see my sound click and my violin, viola, cello recordings, and they'll go, this doesn't look like a CIA, FBI agent to me, and then they'll Google my name in quotes with WTPN, and they might only see one article, and they'll see all this other mass of data, and they can decide what they want about me. But I try to be as open and forthright as possible, as totally as possible, so that if the government ever does come and get me, then everybody's going to know they came and got me.
I don't think that we're necessarily questioning you personally, more the relationship and the outright, what seems like an outright push to get you over to WTPN to do these kind of discussions, and the fact that you just changed your logo today makes it even more suspect, honestly.
Well, I will tell you that we are aware that people are unhappy with with Lawyers for Ron Paul's association with WTPN. I think that's obvious. I'm so busy. I'm working 12, 18-hour days on things like making spreadsheets to enter data into and doing some tracking and some workflow development, that all I hear is in one and out of here, this is the troll, and this person, let's go do this. And, I'm a very I try to be a very non-person, and I'm imperfect. Sometimes I lose my temper. Sometimes I get angry. Sometimes I get short. Sometimes I see things aren't going right, and I quit being Mr. Nice Guy, and I blow up, okay? But I try not to be reactive to anything. I try to always be proactive. I try to think about what would I want to know about what is going on now, and how can I be that? In this case, how can I be that? What do the grassroots really want to know, and what are their concerns? And part of what I'm doing with y'all right now is the most beneficial thing we can do right now is talk about this.
You're absolutely right. It is the most beneficial thing you can do, because there's a whole bunch of people that are being portrayed as disingenuous and troll and all kinds of things because they don't necessarily 100% understand what you're doing. They don't understand all the things you said, and they're just concerned about this severing or hurting what we've gotten to do this far for the campaign and for this election. And it needs to be spoken about. And I don't want to ask a question in a Facebook group and be pointed towards a conference call. I want an answer. But to me, that's just ridiculous. Like, I'm not going to sit on the phone with 1,000 other people trying to get my question out. So, I mean, that's why I'm so happy you're here.
Well, thank you very much. And I want to say to everybody out there in media that might like to interview us, and I'm getting a lot of requests for interviews from all sorts of people. And Richard Gilbert and David Callahan, they get 30 requests for interviews a day. And so Porter and I take up the slack, and other people we're trying to convince people in the executive committee, lawyers for Ron Paul, to do these interviews too. But the people in the media, this is what y'all do. This is y'all's thing. And if y'all can think about it in this way, lawyers for Ron Paul, that's my thing, and that's what I do. So I have cut part of my time out of that and realizing in the importance of doing this and coming and talking about this lawsuit. And when I go to work tomorrow for Lawyers for Ron Paul, because I'm in a position to do this, when I go spend my time tomorrow, many of the things I've talked about today in this interview,
User entered your channel.
They're going to be on my mind tomorrow. And many of the questions I had weeks ago or days ago, I will then be able to draw those resources that I've been exposed to and don't really understand. I'll be able to draw them together. So this interview process, freedom of the press, the First Amendment, it not only serves a purpose of getting information out to people who need it, but it serves the purpose of dialogue and discussion, which, in our government is dead. They don't want dialogue and discussion in our government.
So, Pat, do you get paid? Do you get paid to do this, or is this a paid position for you?
I do not get paid to do this. However, Ron Paul says that whatever we do for liberty, if we're able to capitalize on that without hurting the liberties of others, then we should, by all means, support ourselves by doing that. So what do I get out of doing this, really? I may get Ron Paul nominated on the floor with a plurality of 5 states, and he'll get up and speak, and who knows, maybe we'll have a revolt at a parking lot convention in Tampa, and he'll get elected president. I don't know, but I'm doing everything I can, and that's something I could get out of this. Another thing I can get out of this is I'm designing billboards for Lawyers for Ron Paul to display in Tampa, and we're going to launch an effort to gather funds for those billboards, along with funds to get delegates and other things. So if I create these billboards and they show on the billboard across from the forum, I will be a famous billboard designer, and I will have job offers from all over the world as a billboard designer. So of course, I'm going to capitalize on that by using my skills for free now as an investment, and by using those skills to assist Lawyers for Ron Paul. Another thing I do is I am a coordinator. I'm an information technology coordinator. So perhaps through my work in this and working really hard and doing a good job and getting this injunctive disorder and getting Paul nominated from the floor and seeing his speech, somebody one day might go, man, he did IT coordination for Lawyers for Ron Paul. That was a historic website. Maybe we'll call him to do this job. So I may get some work out of this. So anything we do in the Liberty Movement, even if we're creating art for T-shirts.
I'm not against anybody profiting from something that I'm not against that at all. I was just asking. I mean, I don't. Tom Woods put out a video the other day saying, we're not just out here doing this for free. The free market designates that we should make money from this stuff, and I'm all for that. That's fine. Do you think that you'll have the answers to those questions about the delegates by Thursday?
I make it a priority to determine the potential resultant harms of an issuance by the judge of no injunctive order. What could be the potential harm? And we should all understand that even if the injunctive order is made to protect voter conscience free from coercion, threat, or intimidation, that the GOP can still do anything they want. They can still file a lawsuit against us. They can still file an appeal. So getting the injunctive order or not getting the injunctive order, I think is a point. And an injunctive order lawsuit is very different from most civil lawsuits where you say something has occurred. This has occurred, and I want to sue for damages for this. An injunctive order tells the judge, this has happened, this is happening, and this will happen, and harm has happened, harm is happening, and harm will happen. And that's a very different kind of process in the legal world, as it's little bitty steps. You go through the process, and it's really, you're telling the story that has happened, judge. You're telling the story that is happening to the judge, and you're telling a potential outcome to the judge which will be harmful. So through all this entire process, the GOP strategy is also developing about how to deal with this. And some nasty things can result. But I think that the only harm, I just arrived at a sort of interesting decision. I think that the only harm that can come to these plaintiffs as a result of this lawsuit is from the defendants.
That might be true. I never questioned your motives behind doing this, just the results of what the possibilities are. So,
can I interject for a second?
Yes, please. And I want to tell you how proud I am of work like yours and other people like you, as you have just I saw you just light into the scene, and you started, and you were, you don't care, man. It's like you're going to do this thing, and I love your sign off. I love it.
Pat, I personally know nothing about you, and from what I've heard from what you said tonight, I got in this conversation very late, but from what you say, I want to trust you, and I want to believe that everyone is doing this for the right cause, but I think that there's some people out there that are just joining in this revolution, because that's really what it is. It's a revolution. It's not progress. We're trying to go back. As a country, we've gone too far. We've overstepped the boundaries. We've been degrading the Constitution and completely getting rid of it through executive orders and just other things such that through Obama and other different things through the Congress and just overriding the Congress. But my thought on this as a whole is whoever it is, I don't care what organization it is, as long as they have the right reasons for doing what they're doing, I will back them 110%. I just want them to be doing it for the right reasons. If you can make a profit off of it, but still have the right results in the end, go for it. But I think shutting people out and just kind of closing people out of the conversation and not letting them interject their ideas into a topic of discussion can be detrimental in the end. And I think we all just need to be really open to it, but yet trust but verify is definitely the motto for all of this, because we can't just hop on one thing. Steve Parent is one who's educated me on many different things. Rule 38. I made a video saying that the key to Ron Paul's presidency and election was Rule 38. And through Steve educating me more on it, I learned that Rule 38 does not work in all the states. It works in many states, but not all of them. And I think just having the resources and the ability to just be open to other people's discussion and opinions on things, because none of us know 110% in our hearts that what we say and what we believe is set in stone to be the final answer to all of our questions and problems. We just have to be open-minded and work together, and I think if we all just unite behind one goal of making sure Ron Paul gets nominated and elected in November, it all works out in the end. And Pat, I thank you for everything you've done. I know nothing about you, but you're willing to come on here and discuss and argue with us, and that is the first step to working together. So, Pat, I thank you very much for coming on here.
You're very welcome, Matt Larson 10, and I appreciate your work too.
Pat, this is Steve again. I just have to ask this before Pat goes. Here's kind of one of my personal concerns, and it really probably doesn't pertain to much of the group, but it may add to some of their concerns. I appear to be the only parliamentarian in the group, period. The very first conference call that I was on with you folks, and I was actually asked by Mike, who I think is actually in this room, Mike O'Smith, to actually join the call because there were some delegate questions that were being asked on a particular call. And one important thing actually came up, and this is where I really started to have some reserves, and then I'll get to why my reserves got even worse a couple of days ago. But there was one particular delegate from Alaska that actually was on that call and was saying, which is confirmed by the media, that the chairman of the party was telling people, go fishing that day, don't show up to the convention, don't bother. And he had a very important question about what they can do to obtain a quorum. And when I tried to answer the man's question, I don't know who the woman was, but she was very, very irate and stated, let's just keep the call to what it is about the lawsuit. Well, that was my first concern, because the original lawsuit that I saw was about how you guys were going to unbind the delegates, but if we don't get delegates elected to get to Tampa, all your unbinding is going to be for nothing. And then my second concern was, I was told the reason I was removed from the Lawyers for Ron Paul room was because I was being disruptive and deterring from the lawsuit. So is this just about a lawsuit, or is this about winning the nomination and educating the delegates who are going to be there so we have a chance? Because I really have a lot of different thoughts that I did as of 2 days ago because I was removed from that room without even notice. And this is a big, big concern for me and a lot of the people here in this room. Is this about a lawsuit and data mining, or is this about actually attempting to win the nomination in Florida?
Okay, here's how I need to address that. The attorney, Richard Gilbert, he has entered into a big, huge lawsuit that could potentially be historical, and he's a professional lawyer bound by the rules of the bar, and he right now, lawyers tend to insulate themselves with thick, thick skin and sharp, sharp fangs when they are doing something, when you're involved in a huge lawsuit, and it's all about the lawsuit at that time to the lawyer. Then you have other people around him in the executive committee, Lawyers for Ron Paul, and they're concerned about making the lawyer safe so the lawyer doesn't get knocked off the horse. And there's a lot of data to be gathered to assist Lawyers for Ron Paul. And then we come to the ethical question of the attorney. And that ethical question for the attorney is, if the judge thinks for a split second that I am only doing this to get Ron Paul elected, he'll throw the lawsuit out and he'll strip my license from the bar. So at no time may Lawyers for Ron Paul overtly advocate while we're acting on the lawsuit. We can't overtly advocate for Ron Paul. I can certainly say I support Ron Paul, but I can't say join this lawsuit so Ron Paul will win. What I can say is join this lawsuit so that the delegates and people who may wish for Gingrich or Romney or Santorum or Ron Paul will be able to vote their conscience at the Republican National Convention and these coming state caucuses free from threat, coercion, or intimidation. That's where our head is. We can't create ourselves as a Ron Paul brand. We can call ourselves Lawyers for Ron Paul because we are waging a campaign. And according to Federal Election Commission law, we have to, and according to the judge is going to want to know from our attorney, are you a campaign? Are you truly an electorate, a body of an electorate? Do you truly represent a group that could be harmed? So we are fashioning ourselves as Lawyers for Ron Paul because we believe the body electorate that supports Ron Paul is being harmed. But not only are they being harmed, because they're being harmed, there is ancillary harm to anybody who feels coerced, intimidated, or threatened and cannot vote their conscience. So we can't overtly say we are doing this law to get Ron Paul elected. So you see there's sort of a double bind we're in. We have to be ethical at a particular level, or the judge will accuse us of using the court for partisan politics instead of to defend our right to vote our conscience so that we are not coerced, intimidated, or threatened.
Yeah, but Pat, here's my concern, okay? And I understand that, but I was not in any way trying to deter anything from the lawsuit. I've been very, very clear about this, even when I was skeptical of it, that I was in support of it. If you could get an injunction or set precedents on the books that frees the delegates up based on federal statutes and election law, I'm all for it. I've never, and every single person in this room can attest to that. I've been all for that. But when I'm asked to come into a group and start helping delegates that have questions, and I'm removed for answering questions that delegates are asking me and giving them fact, which, by the way, I've never mentioned Ron Paul's name one time in any one of my posts in your room. But let's be honest, the room's name is called Lawyers for Ron Paul. You know, so that really doesn't make much sense to me. And I'm not trying to be combative with you, Pat. I'm really just trying to get some answers, because I'm really concerned here that this might be for the wrong reason, and giving the delegates half the information when they need 100% of the information to be effective at the convention. And even if you unbind them successfully, if they're not educated on what they have to do at the convention, they can still get outmaneuvered and lose. That's all I really wanted to say. I'll let you answer, and I won't bother you again. Thank you.
Well, I understand that the education of the alternates and delegates at the state caucuses that have not occurred yet, as well as at the Republican National Convention, is very important. I want to tell you, as a member of the Executive Committee for Lawyers for Ron Paul, I understand this, and I agree with it. And that's one of the reasons I was going into the live stream rooms and doing play-by-play and assisting people with understanding that process, because I wanted to understand it better myself. In the Lawyers for Ron Paul Facebook group and in the other social networks, there are people there who only want posts about the lawsuit, and they want to use the group to gather plaintiffs into the lawsuit, to gather prospective volunteers to do service for the lawsuit, to gather people who may be willing to pay for a professional server or assist in any way. So there is a real social human skin dynamic in there. We need people. We need real boots on the ground to do this kind of thing. So there are a lot of people in there who are very adamant. They don't want anything at all. They want nothing at all about anything except the lawsuit. And if you'll notice in Lawyers for Ron Paul, the way the administrators are structured is there's a huge amount of administrators. I'll tell you, in the Ron Paul related groups that I have created, in the Ron Paul community pages that I've created, there's only one administrator, and that's me, except for in Ron Paul billboards. I have one other lady who's a billboard creator with me, and I have Ron Paul banners on Facebook, Ron Paul billboards, Ron Paul money bombers, Ron Paul timeline, and I'm a senior admin on Ron Paul quotes and a couple of other places. But the only Facebook pages and Facebook groups that I participate in are ones with highly limited, very limited admins. And there are a lot of admins in there, Steve. I mean, if you look, and anybody who's a member of the group can click and see who the admins are. And that kind of administrative structure promotes a dynamic that gets lots of people banned, because you have people who are hardcore this way and they don't want anything else to happen, and they'll go ban somebody, and nobody knows who banned anybody else in this kind of situation. So
I understand, but doesn't it make sense to actually have a parliamentarian that could be extremely helpful in not, I mean, obviously I can't be helpful in a lawsuit, I'm not an attorney, but helpful in extremely important and confusing dynamic questions to the delegates that are part of that room, and not only just a parliamentarian, but somebody that you can actually trust. I think it's pretty obvious that at some of these conventions, these parliamentarians can't be trusted because they're establishment people, and I seem to be the only one in that room that was a parliamentarian that was actually willing to offer help and services. This is why it's disheartening to me. And I could care less if you guys say, you know what, Steve, we just don't want you there. I can accept that. But I don't understand why you wouldn't actually want to have help from someone that's on your side. I've been doing this for 5 years with delegates. You can go back and look. Steve was the guy that was actually pushing to get people around the primary and explain to them how the delegate process worked, which has brought this whole thing to fruition, this particular election. I don't understand why you wouldn't want somebody on your side in there actually helping you and advising you in certain manners.
Well, it's not me. I mean, I'm kind of I've just come into the group fairly recently. I mean, in terms of the history of the group, I am a recent addition to the group, more or less, and I'm all for parliamentarians assisting the delegates and alternates, and like these classes on liberty that Tom Woods has given. I really think he's missing the boat here. I'm serious, and I'm not just pandering to you, Steve. You know, I've been in those rooms as Ron Paul banners and the Kadosha Fish thing and the Liberty live stream team that I'm the director of public relations for, and we had the big nice post on Daily Paul that was stuck there for so long, the Texas GOP. I am all for the training of delegates and alternates in the methods of Robert's Rules of Order, and I think that there are resources for this, but perhaps the Lawyers for Ron Paul room, and typically when you think about lawyers, lawyers don't like rules of order unless they're the rules of order of their court and their bar.
I understand that, Pat, but the fact is that Robert's Rules of Order, New Revised Edition, is the legal language to be utilized at the convention.
Yeah, I understand Steve. I understand all of this, and I'm telling you, I'm all for it. But I'm not an administrator in Lawyers for Ron Paul, and I do not intend to be an admin. And I will state this categorically. If I am added as an administrator to Lawyers for Ron Paul, I will remove myself as an admin because that is not the kind of administrative structure that I can function in. I can't function in that kind of...
Okay, so you're not an administrator. Then I was asking the wrong question to you, and I apologize if it seemed condescending in some way. It wasn't meant to be that way, but it is a direct concern to not just myself, but many people in here, why they would remove the only parliamentarian in the room. So I thank you for your time, Pat. I'm not going to bother you anymore. Anybody else have any questions for you, then they can have at it.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that this is the Ron Paul campaign here, and they're not really fond of secrecy, which is what it seems like we've been seeing from the Lawyers for Ron Paul / We the People Network. I guess we've been through a lot of crap over the past, 4 or 5 years now, and they don't know who to trust. They don't know if anybody can be trusted, really. So anytime there's a group that comes in that seems like they're helping, then ends up being very secretive in any way, it becomes a major concern, which is what you guys are seeing right now.
Yes, we're seeing it. I would agree with you there for sure.
What's your take on Doug Weed on Saturday saying that Ron Paul has his own attorneys that he trusts in a response to the question about Lawyers for Ron Paul?
In the 20 years that I've been keeping up with Ron Paul, I live in Louisiana, about 240 miles from his house, and I've been to Vidor, Texas, and into those areas. Did some work for Deborah Medina. I'm really familiar with Ron Paul. What his statement that he has lawyers that he trusts is a good statement because they're probably advising him now on many different matters. We never intended to be Ron Paul's attorney. Our intention is to represent a class of plaintiffs who have been damaged and who are being damaged and will be damaged in the future, who represent a class of the electorate who supports Ron Paul, because these are the people being damaged. So in order to have a class of the electorate to represent, like people of color in the Civil Rights Revolution, we have to have a class of people to represent, so you got to have Ron Paul. Ron Paul people are the ones that are being harmed, so that's who we're going to represent. So we're going to be the lawyers for Ron Paul, for the Ron Paul campaign, but we're also grassroots supporters. So we thought that if we took over the campaign to protect the delegates and to give them a lot of people complained, well, it looks like the GOP is going to force them to vote how they want. Well, we know the campaign doesn't want the grassroots. We consider the grassroots to be the campaign. We don't consider Jesse Benton and all the people who've come through the campaign like bad milk through a baby, if you know what I mean. All those people that have come through that campaign, we don't consider them to be the campaign. We consider them to be operatives who are surrounding Ron Paul and doing what they think is the best thing to do with the campaign. And we don't agree with that. We support the grassroots. We are grassroots. We want to represent this class of injured, damaged, and potentially injured and damaged plaintiffs, and we have to encapsulate that with some kind of moniker that the judge can understand within the perspective of a civil rights lawsuit. We have to give a picture of a damaged portion of the electorate to, and then, you know, the judge has to say, well, what do these people care that are lawyers for Ron Paul? What do they care? Well, they're damaged too.
Hey, Pat, I have a quick question for you. I'm sorry to step in on you like this, but you had, and frequently in your conversation, you stated take over the campaign. So as not to misconstrue those words, could you kind of define or elaborate what you mean when you say that, take over the campaign?
Absolutely. If you're driving down the highway and you see a billboard that says hi, and the next bill, and it's all it says on it in medium-sized words, and then you're driving down the highway and you see a billboard that says wow, and it's got yellow back on it and it's red letters, and then you're driving down the highway and you see a billboard that says incredible and it's in jolt font, and then you're driving down the highway and you see this awesome. Well, we wanted a word that would turn people's heads, that would fire people up, that would make people angry, passionate, that would arouse suspicion, because we wanted suspicion to come upon us immediately so that we could be vetted as quickly as possible, because we don't have much time to be vetted until the RNC. So we wanted, you know, we were going to be accused of taking over the campaign anyway. So, you know, the old saying, talk about my son, talk poorly about my son, talk well about my son, but talk about my son. So I'm a public relations guy. That's one of the reasons I was brought on to the campaign. There are many people who have been successful in the Ron Paul campaign and doing money bombs by doing some crazy stuff, man. And, you know, we're hip too. Just stuffed shirt kind of people hanging around in lawyers for Ron Paul. We can be hip and we can do crazy stuff, and we wanted to be kind of crazy with this. So
you're saying when you're employing this term, take over the campaign, it's really, in a way, and I don't find fault with it if it's not, as long as it's with the right objective. But you're basically suggesting that this is kind of like a psychological operation or social engineering, if you will, to counteract some of these negative actions on the part of the GOP. Is that safe to say? Is that basically what you're saying here?
I think you're in the ballpark there, because the term takeover, I'm sure as many Romney people as Ron Paul people are listening to the lawyers for Ron Paul thing and thinking about this takeover campaign. There's probably people in the Romney and the Santorum camps the Santorum camps still exist, and they're probably saying, who are these lawyers taking over the campaign? And it's really about advertising. It's about branding. It's about causing a ruckus. It's about dropping a bomb on things and blowing things up a little bit and getting people shook up. So when you shake people up, their perspective there's a lot of people that were down about the campaign and they're saying, okay, we lost, man, we don't have enough delegates, and all of a sudden they hear takeover. Who's taking the campaign over, you know? And in a way, we are taking the campaign over in a way. Legally, the judge in California will look at us as the Ron Paul campaign, because we represent this class of plaintiffs who are being harmed, who are Ron Paul supporters. And that is a legal part. That can be legally considered part of the campaign. But we did use takeover
User
as
disconnected
a blast
from your
word.
channel.
Yes, we used it as a blast word.
You guys are claiming to represent the disenfranchised, but you have all the legitimately voted in delegates on your lawsuit, not the ones who were screwed out of their seats. So how exactly is that the same thing?
Well, the first set of plaintiffs that were added to the lawsuit are called the plaintiffs they're the plaintiffs who originally filed the lawsuit. And you have to have original filers of the lawsuit. And those original filers of the lawsuit who were legally elected, they feel coerced, threatened, and intimidated by state laws, in some cases, and state statutes that will penalize them if they go to the RNC and vote their conscience. And they feel coerced, intimidated, and threatened by that. And they want the protection that this attorney, Richard Gilbert, the lawsuit that he authored and is prosecuting for injunctive relief, they want that protection. They want that protective order so they can go and feel as though they are unbound. Now, there's another set of plaintiffs that we have been gathering and working hard to gather, and they will probably be amended to the lawsuit tomorrow. And I think a lot of people are going to be shocked at how many plaintiffs have come on to this lawsuit. I mean, you look at the delegates in Maine, you look at the delegates in Oregon, you look at the delegates in Georgia, who've just been Iowa, who've been kicked. They've just been booted. They've just been slapped down and slapped off. And many of them are going to come on to the lawsuit. But there's also...
You just said, like, not even a half hour ago that you're not sure what the consequences are if they do that. Do you feel comfortable letting them do that before you know?
Absolutely, because the first step in all of this is to protect all of our right to vote our conscience. We can't let the GOP, country club, private party dictate who will or will not be our candidate for president and who will or will not get the money that we pay in taxes to run for president. And we can't let this private party thing, we can't let this happen anymore. This is like in Russia before communism when the czars would have private parties and they would nominate people to be the president. It's not far off from that. And in communist China now, their system over there is only the Communist Party can pick the candidates, and there's a few little other parties that can pick candidates. But the government is in bed with the GOP, and the GOP is breaking the law. We have to take this first step, and we have to reestablish our right to vote our conscience.
I don't think anyone's disagreeing with you at all on that point. I don't think any of us sitting here will disagree with you. What I'm trying to bring across is that, you know, I brought up some questions about what could happen to delegates if they sign on, and you said you really weren't sure and you were going to do some more research, and now you're telling me you got another, how many other delegates signing on tomorrow before you even know. Is that not irresponsible in some way, shape, or form?
Well, I'm not responsible for the legal strategy. I cannot make these decisions. As a member of the Executive Committee for Lawyers for Ron Paul, I have duties to carry out, and one of those duties is to assist in the gathering of plaintiffs. However, my first duty to myself is to believe that this attorney, Richard Gilbert, who I have an executable on my computer that I wrote in C#, and I plug somebody's name into it, and it goes around and crawls around into a lot of nooks and crannies, and it gives me a database report on any individual. I built it myself and wrote it myself, and I've modified it to investigate the attorney, Richard Gilbert. And I am completely satisfied and completely confident in his ability to not only protect the delegates and alternates and other people with this injunctive disorder, but also to protect them his law skills, that he is not exposing them to peril.
Is he a family attorney or is he a constitutional lawyer?
He has had significant practice in many different areas of law. The law firm that he currently works in does some criminal law, but primarily he's done a lot of constitutional law, and he's argued, I believe, he's argued before the Supreme Court of the United States of America. So he has a lot of experience, but I don't, when I interface with Richard Gilbert in our meetings, all I really see is an extremely focused, extremely determined lawyer who has devoted every ounce of his mental horsepower and all of the experience he has in life to this one lawsuit right now. I mean, it's just like me, you know. I put myself in a position.
But here's my thing.
Being really focused and everything is really, really great, and being like, you know, dedicated to something is awesome. Why aren't there 100,000 other lawyers jumping on this?
The reason that other lawyers aren't jumping on this is, number one, and this is going to sound a little conceited, the subject matter that Richard Gilbert is approaching takes a lawyer of great great experience, great research, great learning, and The reason that other lawyers aren't jumping on this is it takes a huge amount of time. And Richard Gilbert, he's in a position because of the money he's made as a lawyer during his life where he can take this time to do this. Another reason lawyers aren't jumping on this is because these are the ways that the law community itself turns on you and devours you and attacks you, because the law community itself is part of the structure of our corrupt government, as we all know. I mean...
Okay, Pat, man, you're very great at branding. I can tell that you're definitely a marketing guy. I can tell that you definitely have a way with words and emotional triggers and whatnot, and I've been listening to this entire conversation here, and I keep hearing a lot of we. But it is not we. It is Richard Gilbert. It is not we the people. It is not Lawyers for Ron Paul. It is Richard Gilbert and his plaintiffs. That is who is filing this lawsuit. So I really wish that you would disassociate Lawyers for Ron Paul from the efforts of Richard Gilbert. The lawsuit is his. It is not yours. You are not taking over any campaign. No one is taking over any campaign. Those are great branding words, but we're not trying to build a brand. We're trying to push a revolution. And you seem to have branding in mind as opposed to having our Constitution and the push and getting Ron Paul into office. You are not the lawsuit. Lawyers for Ron Paul is not the lawsuit. Let's just be honest here and talk about this, because I know it. So I would really like for you to face the reality and tell everyone here and just admit to it that, yes, the Lawyers for Ron Paul group has absolutely nothing to do with Richard Gilbert's lawsuit. They came on after the fact. They're there as a support group, but they are not the lawsuit.
Oh, absolutely. Lawyers for Ron Paul, we're not the lawsuit. But some of the executive committee members of Lawyers for Ron Paul are, one of them is a Supreme Court certified, a state Supreme Court certified paralegal with 40 years of experience. She's done some amazing, incredible things in her life. So to say that the lawsuit is not hers would be inaccurate. She takes ownership of this lawsuit as a state Supreme Court certified paralegal. She takes ownership. It's hers. And then you have the plaintiffs who've entered into the lawsuit, who, as y'all know, are delegates and alternates. That's part of the we that I speak of. And that's very much part of the campaign, because some of these alternates and delegates, before I got involved with Lawyers and Ron Paul, I was doing promotions for them.
Along the same line, but still some question asked far earlier, like about 20 minutes ago. Chris Paul had asked if we would ever find out who's on the committee for Lawyers for Ron Paul, or if we have to file a lawsuit. Do you have like an internet link of a listing of who all these lawyers are?
Oh, well, I'll tell you. When an attorney files a lawsuit and he has paralegals working for him and legal assistants, sometimes he actually files a motion with the court that his paralegals and his legal staff should be protected. And we find in many civil lawsuits and criminal lawsuits, and I always like to draw the parallel to the thuggery of the mafioso of the 20s and 30s, often lawyers who were involved representing mafiosos or representing potential witnesses or plaintiffs or defendants, they would often ask the court, do not publish my legal team's name, for they may be in peril or jeopardy. So if we expose the names of the people who are on the executive committee for Lawyers for Ron Paul, if we expose all of them, some of them may be threatened or intimidated or coerced by the GOP.
Okay. I'll let others ask you more questions. Yeah.
Is this a preventive injunction? Because there's different type of injunctions. Yeah, permanent, mandatory. I mean, is this preliminary or is it preventive injunction? I'm just curious.
I cannot answer that question accurately right now because I haven't been on the team long enough, and I haven't sought that kind of detail. All I do know is that it is an injunctive order that, once signed and ordered by the court, could go as far as to have federal marshals armed with loaded guns and tasers on the floor of the RNC protecting a delegate down there. It could go that far. I do know that it is an injunctive order of one of the most powerful types because it affects civil rights law and because there have been physical injuries that have occurred during this campaign, which the lawsuit is based upon. Therefore, I would think that the injunctive order that Attorney Richard Gilbert is seeking is one of the most powerful ones available.
Okay.
Or just bring back the Wild West.
And this injunction, of course, would affect both the plaintiffs and also other delegates that are not plaintiffs as well.
Absolutely. If the delegates for the Democratic National Convention go up to, I believe it's in North Carolina, if they go up there and they decide they don't want to vote for Obama, and they come back from the convention and the Democratic Party tells them, you're out of the party, not only are you out of the party, but this non-refundable deposit that you gave to us for such and such, we're not giving that back, and we're going to be mean to you, and matter of fact, because your boss is the vice president or the chair of this committee, you're fired too. That would be harm. That would be threat, coercement, or that would meet the letter of the lawsuit, that if they suffered harm because they vote their conscience and vote against Obama, even though they're expected to at that big party that we paid for called the Democratic National Convention, they would be protected by this injunctive lawsuit, injunctive order as well.
So basically, it's just adding teeth to laws that already exist.
It is asking the judge and telling the judge that the current law that's on the book is not being enforced. And not only is it not being enforced, but there is a group of plaintiffs who are being harmed, have been harmed, are being harmed, and will be harmed. And the magnitude of the harm is such that it is a constitutional harm. And the harm is so grievous that we need an injunctive order because people have been hurt. All this is in the lawsuit. People have been hit in the head. People have had we're amending the lawsuit to include information and testimony from people who were physically assaulted, in Louisiana. And that's going to go the judge is going to look at that information and he's going to say, wow, this could be a real, the judge may even think, this is going to be a shootout at the Republican National Convention, or somebody's going to get stabbed there, or somebody's, some martial arts expert is going to break somebody's arm in a fit of anger as they try to do a point of order or try to, do something with Robert Rules of Order, and somebody's getting frustrated. And he'll send federal marshals down there, and the federal marshals will stand on the floor with the delegates, and if anybody punches anybody, federal marshal will reach over there and whack them with a baton and tase them and handcuff them and drag them out. And that's what they did in the civil rights movement.
But do you think that that's beneficial? Like, you guys are going to the federal government to sort of make them more powerful over state law. That's where I kind of have a little bit of an issue.
Well, no, it's the enforcement of law, though, isn't it?
It is the enforcement of law, which is the priority of the executive branch when it pertains to the Constitution of the United States of America. These powers to enforce laws of voting rights are specifically enumerated to the federal government in the Constitution.
So, I do have one question. Why hasn't Ron Paul's lawyers done what you guys are doing? And keep in mind, we just had Doug Whedon here the other night, and he specifically stated, for everybody who was listening, if the campaign is not leading the way on something, it's probably not a good idea to get behind it. What's your response to that?
Well, I did see the article that has remained on the ronpaul2012.com website that cites, it name drops 4 big names of 4 attorneys who supposedly are involved at some level with Ron Paul. However, my research has not shown any litigatory effort on their part or really any statement by them at all. They've remained fairly insulated in a way. I mean, it's not like those lawyers are out campaigning on the campaign trail for Ron Paul. So maybe they're on retainer, maybe they aren't. Maybe their motivations are known, maybe they aren't. But what I can say is that Ron Paul did say in a video that he not only supports our right to do this, but earlier in the campaign there's a video clip of him, I'm sure which some of you have seen in here, that said if there are people that know of election fraud, they should get together and document this and do something about this. And this lawsuit that we're filing, this lawsuit that has been filed here and that has enjoined these plaintiffs, this does address election fraud, because part of election fraud is the intimidation, the coercement, of a person to get them to vote a certain way. That comes under the purvey of election fraud law.
Pat, why is it that we cannot know the names of the executive committee of Lawyers for Ron Paul? When Lawyers for Ron Paul, we've already discussed that you guys aren't officially tied to the campaign. There's what, a few people, 1 or 2 people, maybe 3 that are involved in the lawsuit that are part of that executive committee. Can we know who the rest of the people on the executive committee are, please?
Well, there are 3 people who have been named in our inaugural press release, and that's Cass Ingram, myself, and Porter Davis. And the reason that the names of the people who are on the executive committee, Lawyers for Ron Paul, are not being released is because they could potentially suffer harm. Maybe one of them is an alternate. Well, they can't. I couldn't say that as a hypothetical because alternates and delegates would not be allowed to be on Lawyers for Ron Paul executive committee, or if they were a legal consultant or an attorney or legal researcher in a professional organization, they would not be allowed to be on the lawsuit. So I can tell you that much. You know that no alternates and no delegates are part of the executive committee for Lawyers for Ron Paul. That's a fact.
Okay,
and
so
that's
that,
all. But let me answer your question. Let me go ahead and answer your question.
Okay.
There is the possibility that some of these people are involved in the political process to such an extent that they would be harmed by.
That's totally not our problem, though. We need to know who these people
are. That's
are.
their individual liberty, and Ron Paul says that the protection of an individual's liberty is our duty.
See, you're asking for an awful lot of.
Yeah, this is totally irrelevant. You're sidestepping my question. Can we please focus on my question? My question is very simply, who are the members of the executive board of Lawyers for Ron Paul? This is something that we as supporters, you're supposedly supporting us. You're representing us, all these Ron Paul supporters out there, and the delegates, you're representing us. We need to know who these people that are representing us are. Who's the members of the board of Lawyers for Ron Paul?
Let me ask you a question. Do you know everybody who works for the Ron Paul National Campaign?
I can go on a website and I can look it up right now and I can give you a list, yes.
Are you sure about that? Because there are some people who work for the Ron Paul National Campaign who are named by the Ron Paul National Campaign because
but that's not what we're talking about.
Wait, because they do sensitive work for the Ron Paul campaign, and they choose not to be named, okay? And the members of the executive committee for Lawyers for Ron Paul do not want to suffer potential harm because of what they're doing. And they're just like...
the Lawyers for Ron Paul executive committee refuses to identify themselves, is what you're saying. We have a shadow group that runs Lawyers for Ron Paul that wants us to trust and believe what they're saying and says that they're taking over the campaign and that you've just admitted has nothing to do with the lawsuit that we're actually talking about tonight. So who are you and why are we not talking to Richard Gilbert or somebody that's actually involved with that? Because it seems like you don't have the answers. Who are the members of the board for the executive committee?
Okay. Do you know any members of the executive committee for Lawyers for Ron Paul right now? Do you know any of them?
Yeah. Bonnie Davis Ross, Lynn Nichols, Jerry Davis. I can name, let's see if I can, I'm trying to think of the other lady's name. Isn't Nikki Nelson on that board as well, I believe?
Isn't Patjack on that board? Isn't Porter Davis on that board? Isn't Cass Ingram? Haven't we released our 3 press contacts to you?
No, but that's the committee. That's not the actual people that are behind the scenes making the decisions.
The executive committee for Lawyers for Ron Paul is the organization you're talking about. There is the attorney, Richard Gilbert. There's his legal staff, legal researchers, and paralegals. And then there's executive committee for Lawyers for Ron Paul. That's our structure.
How many people in total?
If I release that information, I would be kicked out of the group.
Okay, just to sort of be fair here.
Listen. This is a legal lawsuit. This is a lawsuit that is very dangerous. I mean, delegates and alternates.
I'm going to give you the benefit of doubt here with what I'm about to say, and I know I overrode you for a reason. Okay, if these people that you're keeping hidden, their names hidden, that you're doing this for their protection from any physical and or relational attacks, how about getting actual, not myself because I'm in a different location, but getting some actual Ron Paul supporters that you are willing to a certain degree, trust to physically defend these people, type of thing. In other words, they defend you, you defend them, vice versa. In other words, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, but both ethically speaking. And if you're not willing to do that, then I don't know.
You mean instead of having federal marshals supplied by the U.S. government, we have our military and our veterans go to the convention who are black belts in karate and trained with weapons to defend them? Is that what you mean?
No. I'm saying, okay, you were suggesting getting federal marshals, etc., to defend the delegates for Ron Paul. And other delegates, too, that want to vote their own way, even if it's for any other candidate. Now, but you are also mentioning that you don't want to give away who the people are in the executive committee for their protection.
Okay, it's not, listen, it's
Why
not
don't
me.
you get protection for them?
Listen, I'm overriding you now. It is not
Okay,
me.
deal.
It is not me who is hiding them. I have a non-disclosure agreement. I have a contract which Ron Paul says we should honor our agreements and our contracts. And I honor the contract I have with them. We have a non-disclosure agreement in our group, and that means any and all information. The only information that we release to the public is stuff that won't hurt our legal strategy and that satisfies people who need or want to know about the lawsuit. The people who don't want to be identified, they have made that decision themselves. They're not slaves to the non-disclosure agreement. They are the non-disclosure agreement, a contract, an agreement.
So you guys come on the scene, the very first thing you say is you're taking over the Ron Paul campaign, which you said earlier is kind of a buzzword being employed, which in itself was manipulative and a lie in itself, and you expect us to turn around and believe you after that? You started off on the wrong foot. That's the wrong way to gain Ron Paul followers.
Well, we don't believe it's a lie because we appear before this judge as an entity that has such concern over this group of plaintiffs that we want to take control of it with an injunctive order to protect them. So we are taking over the campaign because Ron Paul didn't protect those. The Ron Paul National Campaign did not protect those delegates that were harmed in Louisiana. They didn't protect the man that was arrested in St. Louis who had the first parking lot convention. And the man that got hit in the back of the head, their lawyers didn't run to protect him. So we are taking over the campaign to provide protection for the delegates and alternates with broken bones, hospital bills, so on and so forth. We're doing that.
But you're not doing it for the campaign, you're doing it for the people who are affected that just so happen to support the campaign, correct?
So you consider delegates and alternates duly elected going who want to vote their conscience to be some periphery frivolous group?
I'm sorry, but I agree with this argumentation. I hate to admit that.
So do you agree that the group of delegates and alternates who are duly elected going to the Republican National Convention to support Ron Paul are in some way a frivolity and that they're not to be protected, and that somebody who would fail to protect them at the conventions is allowed to be the campaign while a group of people who are spending money and their own resources to protect these delegates at the RNC are not allowed to take over the campaign with respect to this. So it's not only a buzzword, it's not only a marketing word or a branding word, but we are extending protection to the delegates, which the national campaign failed to do.
Here's my thoughts on that. And you know what? I agree with you, Pat. We are the campaign. We are the movement. I honestly think that things kind of started out on the wrong foot, saying that they're taking over the campaign, because nobody can take over the campaign. We are the campaign. The delegates are the campaign for Ron Paul. So to say that people are taking over the campaign, it's saying that you are taking over the grassroots and taking over just the delegate process, which is not true. What you are doing, though, it is a very good service, because I wish that the lawyers of Ron Paul would step up and actually go and try to defend us in the court of law when all these things happen, like you're talking about the different parking lot conventions and the bones getting broken and stuff like that. I would love to see Ron Paul being more vocal about that. And we do need people to step up and stop taking the shit that the GOP and RNC is giving us. The stuff that is happening to us is completely uncalled for, and I don't like disagreeing with everyone here, and I believe that the intentions of the majority of the people in the Lawyers for Ron Paul is good, but I somehow think that some of the higher-ups are maybe doing it some for the right reasons and some for the wrong. But Pat, myself, I truly and honestly believe that you are doing it for the right reasons. You seem like a very good person. You are willing to come on here and talk with us and actually have a debate. That is the biggest step right there to building that bridge and making it so we can work together. And I don't want us to be arguing. I want us to be talking constructively and just working everything out as much as we can and just getting on the same page and just working together, because we have so many assets when we all work together. And just stopping this division, the division is what will beat us. We have so much power when we all unite together and we just work together to just figure this out, put our differences aside, set any type of people that are doing this for profit and just going out for it and doing it as big as we can, because if we don't stand together, we fall together.
But see, another thing that I'm just observing here, and I'm learning just by this conversation here, and being somewhat familiar with large corporate law cases, civil cases, and so forth, yeah, it's not uncommon to have plaintiffs and or defendants sequestered. They're totally either by a judge imposing a sequestering or of their own due diligence and prudence for the welfare of the overall case, take themselves out of the radar. I just want to make that clear that is not uncommon in these type of cases.
I think I have a question to touch back on this subject. You stated, just like Carlos said, that Lawyers for Ron Paul is just a support of the Richard Gilbert, the actual lawyer that's doing the lawsuit. But the Lawyers for Ron Paul actually have an executive team. They are not a part of the lawsuit. They are a part of Lawyers for Ron Paul. Why are we not getting information about that supposedly took over the campaign?
That's what we've been doing all these interviews for. That's what I'm here for right now, is to give you information. And that's what this coming Thursday night at 8 p.m., the interview with Porter and I, who are both members of the executive committee for Lawyers for Ron Paul, will be here to do at 8 p.m. this coming Thursday.
Just for clarification for other sakes here, Pat, and I had no problem with you interrupting me before because I already did that to you. So what goes around comes around. You earlier said that the taking over Ron Paul's campaign is more like a buzz phrase. In other words, it's not technically correct, but it's the easiest to understand by the lay people. Well, you didn't word it that way, but is that right?
Well, I'll explain it again, and I've been working on the explanation for that. It is both a buzzword and a truth, and we all understand the buzzword part. But the truth is that when the judge looks at the lawsuit and begins to preside over it and make decisions, he's going to ask himself, number one, do I have a list of plaintiffs who are representative of a group of people who are being harmed, have been harmed, will be harmed, according to this election law that Attorney Richard Gilbert has stated is not being enforced? So he needs to ask that question first. And then he's going to say, is this a single person, or is it a subset of the body of the electorate, and is there a campaign associated with it? In other words, is this a bunch of people who have come into the court saying that their election rights are being violated, but they really don't have a candidate to pin this to? The judge needs to know that there's a campaign there, that there are people there who are doing this because one of the potential plaintiffs in this lawsuit is Ron Paul. He's a potential plaintiff, just like anybody whose voting rights, because he votes in elections. So he's also a candidate. So a group of people who are asking for an injunctive order on this level of civil rights voting law with respect to the three key words which are in the law, from the law, the coercion, threat, or intimidation, those people in that lawsuit as plaintiffs, they have to have a candidate. They have to be a campaign. So right now, because the lawsuit hasn't been thrown out, we are recognized as a campaign element, and our candidate is Ron Paul. And we're saying that the supporters from Ron Paul have been harmed, are being harmed, and will be harmed, suffer threat, intimidation, or coercion. So we are a campaign. So that buzzword takeover, it's a marketing, it's a branding campaign, but it's to wake people up, it's to get grassroots to take back. What y'all are doing right now, confronting us, saying this is our campaign, we control this campaign. This is what many of us in the executive committee and many people involved with the lawsuit, this is what we've always wanted. We don't want Benton running the campaign. We don't want Douglas Feith in this campaign. We don't want these people who have been hired to surround Ron Paul while he's so busy getting the House to pass the Audit the Fed bill. We don't want these people to campaign anymore, so we want to shake them up too. We want them to take a look at our lawsuit and say, man, these people might really take over our jobs and we won't be getting paid anymore. And my wife will be mad at me and my kids will have to drop out of school. We want them to really think about their positions now and what they've done, what they're doing, and what they will do. So to say that in some senses, according to the judge's perspective as he presides over this lawsuit, he'll see a concerned group of people who have filed a lawsuit and joined as plaintiffs who want to take over this campaign and ameliorate the harm coming to the people who will vote for this candidate. So in a real way, to the judge and to the law, it is a takeover. And as a matter of fact, for the lawsuit to proceed, the judge has to consider it a campaign. Now, whether we are taking over the campaign, whether we'll succeed in that, or whether we really want to do that is a moot point. Because what we really want to do is we wanted to rouse people to the exact level that y'all are at right now. And I'm proud of the Executive Committee for Lawyers for Ron Paul for getting you people angry, asking questions, thinking, being suspicious, and wanting to know not only about Executive Committee for Lawyers for Ron Paul, but about the real campaign and who they really are and what they represent at this point.
If Steve Parent is still here, can you respond to, I'd love your response to what Pat had to say.
I'm going to be very much unpopular in this room after I say what I'm saying, but I totally agree with a large part of what you're saying, Pat. I really do.
Thanks for listening. I mean, part of what I've been doing is on the committee as I sit and work, and I have a bunch of computers around me in my little office here at my home, and part of what I've been doing is thinking about all these issues and how I'm going to present them and what I can say and what I can't say, what I do know and what I don't know, and what I can say that's as honest and truthful as possible. And I'm a marketer in a way, and I love branding, and I love to study that. And I mean, with Liberty Live Stream Team, I'm a totally different animal. I'm totally a marketer. I'm totally a public relations director. But with this, I really have to think about what do I really want to accomplish, and can I damage the lawsuit? Can I damage the campaign? Can I damage the grassroots? Can I damage me? So it's a little kind of a tightrope and a bed of nails all at the same time. But I want to get y'all as much information as possible, and I want to assure you that I'm constantly thinking about and working on documents. I get these documents from other media organizations that have these pre-prepared questions, and during the day, I'm looking at these questions, I'm researching them, and I'm figuring out how to answer them to the best of my ability, where it's honest and transparent and gives people the truth that they need about this thing as we go forward.
Can I just interject real quick? I think the most palatable way I could think of, maybe an alternate way, and many would probably even object to this being really much better than your campaign, if you will, your buzzwords, if you will, but justice taking over the campaign, because basically what this is a counteraction to the great injustices that have occurred in this whole campaign.
Absolutely, it's absolutely it's a counteraction. We are partially, as Lawyers for Ron Paul, this lawsuit, Richard Gilbert, we are in reactive mode to what has not happened in the campaign and how we feel slighted by it. But we're in proactive mode as well to protect the delegates and alternates and to create this analogous situation where they're unbound because they'll be protected by the injunctive order.
What I have a hard time is...
Whoa, your mic.
Hold on, sorry.
Oh, that's better.
Where I can't speak.
Chris, it wasn't that bad, Chris. Hey, what were you saying, Tracy?
Where I have a hard time is that...
Now it's hard to hear.
Where I have a hard time is that, you say you're trying to be transparent, but you can't give names of people that are working with you. And, I understand there's certain legal ramifications behind that, but I also feel like it's a PR stint at the same time. I want full transparency from you guys. And, You know, that's all we're all looking for, pretty much. So.
But it's part and parcel with the legal system too. It is a common practice, and I would wish that too, honestly, Tracy. But
so I'm asking now. I'm asking everybody who's in the chat to formulate. You have one question that I know you have a question you want to ask. Maybe it has been answered. Maybe it's been approached. But formulate it in the words that you want to ask it in, and type it in there as a helper to me, so I can see what Porter and I may be. You know, what we should prepare to answer for you. Please type in one succinct question that's on your mind. And sometimes we ask questions differently when we type them or write them than we do when we speak them. So please, I encourage you all to do that.
While they're doing that, what I was going to mention to you, Pat, is that even if your motives are right and et cetera, I'll just go give you the benefit of the doubt, at least for the time being, regarding that. The one thing I guess not myself, okay, for me, because otherwise I'd be a hypocrite, one thing others don't like about people jumping in for justice for other people, like for example, in this case, justice for Ron Paul, is if the person that's getting the justice if a public figure hasn't asked for the justice publicly. So it indirectly, from their point of view, not mine, because I would do this if I was in that position, and it gets people mad at me, is it makes the campaign for Ron Paul look bad that they themselves didn't do what you're doing.
There certainly could be some people who look at our lawsuit and they think about things and they go, well, why didn't old Ron Paul do that himself? Why did these people have to come about and do that themselves? And that's a really good observation. And you have set me to thinking about that. And that's a public relations matter. So you've given me something good. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
I just, man, I know you guys hate having me saying these comments, but I mean, if someone's taking up the sword and defending the laws to actually empower the laws that are there, I just don't see the problem with it.
Some people think that the way that our society is set up right now is that lawyers often take up the judicial sword, and what they do is to hack the public to bits with it, with the existing laws that have been put in place to enslave us and to damage us and to hurt us. So we are all very we're reticent to jump on board here, and we're suspicious, and we should be. And you should do your due diligence, and you should make your own decisions. And I mean, our society is this tapestry of wretched laws, and the lawyers are in on it, okay? And so to trust one of the, invading barbarians who's run across the hill and says that he now loves your society, that's a difficult thing to do, and that's part of public relations in general for attorneys and for this as well. So that's why we're out here trying to answer questions as best as we can and be real people,
I already said my piece. Thank you.
Well, we're really at a point where a lot of information has come out, and I feel a calm settling in. The chat's not moving, but there's still a bunch of people here, so they're all probably in PM right now, goofing off, which they should be doing because that's a lot of fun. And there's a lot of things to think about here. And what I really want to encourage everybody to do is reformulate your questions. Make them sharper. Make them more precise. Exercise me and Porter. Exercise us. Challenge us with your questions. Because if this injunctive order gets signed, mainstream media is going to want to interview me and Porter and Cass and others. And we're really going to be up against some real tough people who are going to pre-record us, who are going to ask us to sign pledges and agreements, and we're not going to do any of that. We're making the mainstream media come to us now. We're counting on media like y'all to be the happy, and this is not insulting, but to be the happy dogs who are eating the good food, and the rest of the media sitting out in the field grumbling, looking at us going, yeah, he put out some food for us, but like he's going to have to come to us and scratch my belly because I'm such a good-looking dog, So that's kind of like what we're doing. We're not going to the mainstream media. We're making our time available to grassroots, independent media, because this is our support base anyway. Sure, maybe we should go to Ben Swan. He's done a lot for the campaign, but he's still mainstream media, and he has the resources and the ability to come to us just like he's come to everything else. So we're making ourselves more available to grassroots media because we know that you know the campaign better than they for your questions are going to be a better exercise of our ability to then formulate information for one day if we get on mainstream media. We'll remember all this that we did in here, and when old Wolf Blitzer asks a question, we'll have it for him, and we can say it in such a way that it won't be easily editable to put mouths in our words or be decontextualized. It's a great exercise, and I want to encourage y'all to continue to think and write down these questions and really hit us hard like you do, you know. And this has been a very, very, very civil interview. It's been very nice. Everybody has really been great, and I just want to say that my first experience here has been awesome. I'm looking forward to this 8 p.m. Thursday meeting, and you can probably tell that my mouth is getting a little thicky, and this is because I'm exhausted. I've been up since early this morning. I've been super focused doing lots of stuff. So I do need to go. I would like to take any additional questions that you have before I go, if you have any concerns, but I suspect that y'all are about as tired as I am too. So if we could wait till 8 p.m. Thursday, that would be good for me so I can get up in the morning and won't get in trouble when I open up executive committee morning late in the morning.
Thanks for coming in tonight, Pat.
You're welcome. Thank you for making me your resources available to me. And if you'll put together a little promotions paragraph with a link to the show and PM me that at my Facebook, I will be glad to promote the show just before it goes off. And you know, vote up your Daily Paul post, put a comment on the Daily Paul post, you know, saying that, yes, I will be there, Porter will be there, and we'll have a good show this Thursday. We'll have lots of people in here. Okay, gang, I got to sign off, you know, because I'm tired, and it's been a pleasure talking with you, but I am going to click that button because I got emails building up and stuff, and I want to thank all of y'all, and I'll say good night to y'all, and I'll see you at 8 p.m. Miss Talking Liberty, we'll see you then with Porter.
Good night.
Good night,
Thank
y'all.
you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.